Thanks for watching and liking the video. I stood in the empty office, staring at the door with a lock that wasn't mine. Yesterday, this was our business. Today, it's his. And the worst part, my own brother did it. We started from nothing. I'm 5 years older, and for as long as I can remember, I was the one pulling him out of trouble, paying his tuition, keeping him on track. When I launched my first small company selling specialized equipment for warehouses, he was still in college. I didn't make much back then, barely enough to cover rent and keep the lights on, but it was something I built with my own hands. A year later, he came to me one night, said he was done with school, that he wanted to work with me. I didn't even think twice. It was my brother. I trusted him more than anyone else in the world. Turned out, he was a natural, confident, sharp, charming, the kind of guy people said yes to even before he finished his pitch. He could close deals I wouldn't even dare to start. He had this way of talking to clients that made them believe in him instantly. I handled the operations, logistics, numbers, the boring side of things. He brought the money in. We complemented each other perfectly. The first year, we made around $200,000 in sales. By the 5th year, we crossed 10 million. 10 million. I still remember saying it out loud for the first time, almost laughing because it sounded unreal. We had 20 people on payroll, 3 offices, and clients in 5 states. We weren't some startup chasing investors. We were profitable, stable, and growing. He was the face of the company. I was the backbone. He'd be on the road, meeting big clients, posting photos from trade shows, shaking hands with executives. I stayed behind, making sure orders shipped on time, invoices matched, and suppliers got paid. It worked. We trusted each other completely. People used to say, it's rare to see 2 brothers running a business without fighting. I'd always answer, that's because we're not just partners, we're family. And I believed that. I believed that with everything I had. When we signed our first big contract, a deal worth almost $2 million, he looked at me and said, we did it, man. Together. I remember that night clearly. We grabbed burgers on the way home and talked about how we'd grow the company. Maybe even bring our parents on a trip to celebrate. It wasn't about the money back then. It was about building something that would last. Something ours. I trusted him more than I trusted myself. And that's what makes it hurt now, standing in this office, staring at the lock I didn't buy, realizing the person I trusted most didn't just walk away. He took everything we built and made sure my name disappeared from it completely. When our revenue passed 5 million, my brother came to me with a new idea. He said we needed to restructure the business, create a holding company, separate the assets, make it all tax efficient. His exact words were, we'll protect what we've built, and it'll make future expansion easier. We just need to do it before the quarter ends to keep the deductions. It sounded smart, logical. At that time, I was buried in negotiations with a new client that could double our yearly income. My days were 14 hours long, and I barely slept. So when he said he'd handle the paperwork, I didn't hesitate. You deal with the legal side, I told him. Just keep me updated. He brought in a lawyer, a smooth, confident guy in his 40s who talked fast and smiled a lot. We met once, all 3 of us, in the conference room. The lawyer said it was a standard structure that would make both of us equal shareholders through 2 subsidiary companies under one parent company. He went on about liability, tax benefits, and efficiency. In the fine print, the lawyer had written that the managing authority would belong solely to my brother as executive director. I didn't even notice that line when I signed. It all sounded clean, professional. My accountant sat beside me, flipping through the draft documents. She nodded, said everything looked normal. I remember signing the pages without really thinking about it. I just wanted to get back to the client call waiting for me in the next room. After that, nothing seemed different. We kept running things as usual. The warehouse was full, the phones didn't stop ringing, and our revenue hit new records. My brother was constantly on the move. New York, Chicago, Denver, always chasing new partnerships and conferences. He was in the press once, giving an interview about family business success stories. I didn't even mind that he spoke as if he ran the whole thing. I figured that's what a good face of the company does. I stayed focused on the core, operations, production schedules, quality control, the things that kept the company running day to day. My brother thrived on energy and deals. I thrived on systems and discipline. We needed each other, and I never questioned that. Sometimes, our employees would joke that he was the rock star, and I was the engine room. I'd just smile. I didn't need attention. He could have the spotlight, as long as the numbers kept adding up. Every few months, he'd fly back for a couple of days. We'd grab lunch, talk strategy. He'd say things like, "We're just getting started," and I'd nod, thinking how lucky we were to have made it this far. Looking back, there were moments, tiny ones, when I noticed he was getting more secretive with the finances. New clients he didn't mention right away, accounts he handled personally. But I brushed it off. He was always networking, always closing. That was his thing. If anyone had asked me then whether I trusted my brother completely, I would have said yes without blinking. He earned that trust. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he did. About 6 months later, I started to notice small things that didn't add up. My brother stopped showing up at the office as often. At first, he blamed travel, client meetings, conferences, new markets. But even when he was in town, he'd cancel check-ins or push meetings last minute. When I texted him, sometimes he'd reply hours later with short messages like, "Busy, call you tomorrow." Then I saw something strange in the monthly reports. One of our biggest clients, one that usually wired payments to our main business account, had sent money somewhere else. I thought it was an error, so I asked our accountant about it. She said, "Your brother told me to redirect payments to the new holding account. Said it's for international transfers and tax reasons." That didn't sit right with me. The payments were large, 6-figure amounts, and they were supposed to go straight to the company account we'd always used. I called him immediately. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was calm, casual. "Yeah, I moved a few accounts. It's just easier for cross-border stuff. Don't worry, I'll show you everything once the quarter closes. It's all under the holding company. Same ownership, same money." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something in his tone felt off, like he was trying too hard to sound relaxed. I asked for access to the new account, just to check things myself. He said, "Of course. I'll send you the login after we finalize a few contracts. It's still being set up." He never sent it. Weeks passed. We were busier than ever, and on the surface, everything looked fine. Orders came in, shipments went out, clients were happy. But every time I checked the books, the numbers didn't look quite the same. Some deposits were missing, others delayed. When I mentioned it to him, he brushed it off. "Cash flow timing. Don't get paranoid, man. You're managing the operations perfectly. Let me handle the big deals." That line stuck with me. Let me handle the big deals. Like I wasn't part of them anymore. Late one night, I opened our internal chat system and saw that he'd archived a few client channels, ones I used to monitor regularly. When I asked him why, he said, "They've moved under the holding company for confidentiality reasons." Again, the same explanation, optimization. I started keeping copies of every financial report, every invoice, every email that mentioned the holding structure. Not because I expected trouble, just because something inside me told me to. Still, I didn't confront him. He was my brother. We had built this together. I told myself he was just busy, maybe overcomplicating things for efficiency. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first sign. The moment when trust started turning into suspicion, one unanswered message at a time. A month later, I found something that stopped me cold. I was searching our shared inbox for an old invoice, and one email thread caught my eye. It was between my brother and one of our main suppliers. The subject line said, "New contract structure." I opened it. He was discussing how the supplier should transition to direct contracts through the new entity. And this part made me read it 3 times. He specifically wrote, "Don't include my brother's name on any future documents." I just sat there, staring at the screen. My first thought was that it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe he meant something else. But the longer I looked at it, the clearer it became. He was cutting me out. Quietly. Systematically. I called him right away. He didn't pick up. I tried again. On the 5th ring, he answered. His voice sounded tired. "Listen," he said, "I can't talk right now. Let's meet tomorrow morning, okay? I'll explain everything." The next day, we met at a small cafe near the office. He showed up late, wearing a suit I'd never seen before. He looked different, sharp, closed off. When he sat down, he didn't look me in the eye. He started talking fast, like he'd practiced the speech. He said he wanted to buy me out. He had an investor interested in scaling, but the investor only wanted one owner, for simplicity. He said it was nothing personal, just business. Then he named a price, $2 million. He called it a fair deal and said I could start something new, fresh, without the headaches. I couldn't even process what I was hearing. 10 years of work, and he was offering to erase me from it with a check. I asked why he hadn't talked to me about this before. He shrugged, said he didn't want to complicate things, that he thought I'd understand once I heard the plan. I told him no, flat out, that it wasn't just a business, it was ours. A decade of late nights, missed birthdays, risk after risk. He didn't argue. He just looked down at his coffee and said quietly, "Okay, if that's how you feel." Then he stood up, left a few bills on the table, and walked out. No anger, no goodbye, just gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of what just happened. I told myself it was just frustration, that he'd cool off, that we'd talk again. But deep down, something in me knew that conversation wasn't the beginning of a negotiation. It was the end of something I didn't realize had already started 3 months earlier, when he began setting everything up behind my back. 3 weeks later, I drove to the office early, like always. But when I tried to unlock the door, the key didn't fit. I thought I was just tired, tried again harder. The lock had been changed. There was a printed notice taped to the door. The company has relocated. For inquiries, contact management. No address, no phone number, just those words. I stood there, staring at it, not really understanding what I was looking at. I called my brother. No answer. I texted him. The message showed read a few minutes later. Still no reply. By noon, I was in my car, driving to the lawyer who'd handled our restructuring. He looked surprised to see me. I told him what happened, showed him the notice. He pulled up our file and skimmed through it, page by page, before leaning back in his chair. "From what I can see," he said, "your brother had full control over the holding company. You both signed an agreement giving him operational authority and the right to reorganize subsidiaries at his discretion." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But we were equal partners," I said. 50-50. He nodded slowly. "On paper, yes. But operational control was centralized under the holding structure. That means he can move assets, create new entities, reassign contracts. It's legal. Not ethical, maybe, but legal." I felt the air leave my lungs. Then he added, 2 months ago, he started registering a new company under his own name. Over the last several weeks, he's been transferring active contracts from the old entity to the new one. The remaining company is left with operational debts and supplier obligations. Technically, your name is still attached to those. I just sat there, silent. He kept talking, explaining the timelines, the documents, the filings, but I couldn't hear any of it. The only thing I understood was that it was over. Everything we'd built, gone. I walked out of that office and stood on the sidewalk, watching cars pass like nothing had happened. People were laughing, walking their dogs, grabbing coffee. The world kept moving, like my life hadn't just been erased with a few signatures. That evening, I drove back to the office one more time. The lights were off inside. The sign with our logo was already gone. I pressed my hand against the glass door and saw my reflection staring back, someone who didn't exist in that space anymore. My phone buzzed once. A message from my brother. "It's done. Please don't make this harder." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. After that day, everything started falling apart. I tried calling a few of our main clients to explain what happened, but they already knew. One of them said, almost apologetically, "Your brother told us you were stepping away for personal reasons. We've already signed new agreements with his company." I didn't even know what to say. Every door I knocked on was already closed. Suppliers, partners, even the warehouse manager, all had been told I was out. My brother had rewritten the story before I even realized there was one. I called our parents that night. My mother started crying before I finished the sentence. She kept saying, "Your brothers, you'll fix this." My father was quieter. He said, "You built something together. Don't destroy it over pride." But they didn't understand. It wasn't pride. It was survival. Weeks went by. I stopped checking my phone every hour, stopped expecting him to call. But then, one afternoon, an envelope came in the mail. It was from his attorney. Inside was a letter, formal, cold. It said he was offering to buy out my remaining shares in the holding company for $150,000. At first, I thought it was a joke. But as I read further, I realized it wasn't an offer. It was a warning. The letter explained that while my share formally exists, it has no operational value, since all assets had been moved to his new entity. It also said that my continued presence as a co-owner was creating legal complications for future investment rounds. The last line hit me hardest. If you decline this offer, we will have no choice but to initiate bankruptcy proceedings for the old company due to accumulated obligations, which may affect your personal credit history. I sat there with that letter in my hands for a long time. My name was still on a company that technically existed but owned nothing except debts. I thought about the first years, about those nights we stayed up planning deliveries, arguing about margins, celebrating every small win. I thought about how he used to say, "We're untouchable because we're family." And now here I was, alone, with a pile of papers that proved how wrong I'd been. He hadn't just betrayed me in a moment of weakness. He had planned it, step by step. The restructuring, the new accounts, the client transfers, every move had a purpose. And I'd signed every document that gave him the power to do it. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark, reading that letter over and over until the words stopped meaning anything. I hired a new attorney a week later. A friend recommended him, someone sharp, independent, with no ties to my brother. He spent 2 days reviewing every contract, every restructuring document, every transfer I could dig up. When he finally called me in, his tone said everything before he even opened his mouth. He told me the truth straight. "You can sue," he said, "but it's going to take years, and hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Even then, you might not win. Everything he did falls within the legal authority you both signed over when you formed that holding company." I just sat there, staring at the table. He kept going. "The only leverage you have left is your formal ownership share in the original holding. Technically, that still exists. It's worthless in money, but it prevents him from presenting a clean structure to new investors." I asked, "What happens if I refuse to sell?" He paused, then said, "Then you become his problem. He can't close any new funding rounds while your name's on the paperwork. Investors hate uncertainty, but you'll still be tied to the debts of the old company. If he files bankruptcy, it could hit your credit. You'd both lose, just in different ways." I leaned back in my chair. There was no good move left. Either take the $150,000 and walk away from 10 years of work, or fight and burn through everything I had left, maybe for nothing. Or just do nothing. Let the situation hang in the air, unresolved. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the last time we'd celebrated together. We were standing in the warehouse, surrounded by pallets stacked high with shipments ready to go. He looked at me and said, "You're the reason this works. I could never do this without you." I remembered believing him completely. Now I understood what that kind of trust cost. My lawyer waited for my answer. I told him I needed time. He nodded. "Just remember," he said quietly, "whatever you choose, make sure it's something you can live with, not just financially." After he left, I sat alone in that office. The walls felt closer than usual, like the air had weight. I thought about what it meant to lose something you built with your own hands, and what it meant to let the person who took it walk away clean. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever decision I made, it would define everything that came after. I didn't sign. I didn't respond to his lawyer's letters. I just went quiet. Weeks passed, then months. The emails kept coming. First polite reminders, then more urgent ones. I ignored every single one. 2 months later, he finally called me himself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice didn't sound like before. The confidence was gone. There was a tension in it, almost panic. He said, "I need you to sign. The investors are asking for a clean structure. They won't move forward until you release your share." I stayed silent. He kept talking. "Look, I can raise the offer to $300,000. That's double what we offered before. But this has to happen now. They're running due diligence and found the old holding company still lists you as co-owner. It's a risk to them." I could hear papers rustling on his end, the sound of him pacing. He wasn't calm anymore. He was cornered. I asked one question, "Why does it matter so much to you that I sign?" There was a long pause. Then he exhaled and said quietly, "Because if you don't, the deal falls apart. I'll lose $8 million in investment. I've got payroll, contracts, deadlines, I can't keep it going without that funding." He sounded desperate. It was the first time I'd ever heard him like that. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't powerless anymore. I didn't have money or control or staff, but I had something he didn't: the right to say no. I thought about what my lawyer said, how my name on those papers made me a problem he couldn't solve. And I realized, for once, I could decide the ending. He tried again. "You'll still walk away with something. 300,000 is fair. You can start fresh." But that wasn't what this was about anymore. It wasn't about the money or revenge. It was about truth. If I signed, I'd be helping him rewrite it. He'd stand in front of investors and say it was a smooth transition, that I agreed, that everything was legitimate. If I didn't sign, there'd always be a question, a missing piece, a mark in the records that wouldn't disappear. He called my name once more, waiting for an answer. I said nothing, just listened to him breathe, then hang up. That silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. But it was also the first moment since it all began that I felt like I had control again. I never signed. Not out of anger. Not out of greed. I just knew that if I did, he'd win cleanly. Every trace of what happened would vanish. The deal collapsed 2 weeks later. I heard from someone in the industry that his investors walked away after they found the ownership conflict in the filings. Without that funding, the company started to unravel. 6 months later, 2 of his biggest clients pulled out. He tried to replace them, but his delivery time slipped and the operations couldn't keep up. I didn't reach out. I didn't celebrate. I just watched from a distance as the company that once carried both our names started to fade from view. He called once more, months after the deal fell apart. I saw his name on the screen and let it ring. Then it stopped. He didn't leave a message. I started over. Not with another big plan, not chasing growth or revenge, just something small. A few clients I'd known for years, people who trusted me. No investors, no partners. Just steady work, clean and honest. At first, it felt strange to be alone. But slowly, I got used to it. I learned how to move without checking someone else's approval, how to rebuild from scratch without explaining every choice. Sometimes my mother still calls and says, "You two need to talk. You're brothers." I tell her maybe someday. But I know it's not true. Some things don't get fixed. The office we once shared is now leased to another company. I walked by it once out of curiosity. The logo's gone. The furniture's different. There's no sign of us anywhere. But for a second, I could almost see it. The two of us sitting there years ago, arguing over pricing, planning the next move, laughing like none of it could ever fall apart. I stood there for a while, watching strangers move through that space, not knowing what it used to be. Then I turned and left. I don't think about revenge anymore. Or justice. Those things fade with time. What stays is the lesson you don't put into words, the one you live with quietly, every day. You can rebuild a business. You can even rebuild a life. But you can't rebuild trust once it's been sold off in pieces. And a brother who chooses to erase you from his story, he's already gone. Thanks for staying till the end. What's your take on this story? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe. More true and hidden stories are coming soon.